Welcome everybody to the new episode of our CCIR Student Spotlight. It's a pleasure today to have with us Isabella. Um, my name is Oliver, I'm your host. I am the Marketing and Outreach Coordinator at CCIR and also a current student at Georgetown studying actually something quite related, directly related. Bella is working on. I'm a current PhD student in philosophy at Georgetown, and welcome, Bella.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so Bella, if you don't mind, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a 16-year-old junior at the American School in London. I have a very traditional, loud Italian mother and a Norwegian father. But I was born here and I was raised in London my whole life. And, my mom being Catholic, when I was growing up, she seemed to have these very resolute answers to these big questions, which is ultimately what's inspired my love for philosophy. And now I decided I want to completely immerse myself in it, which is why I took this course, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, and so the course you're taking is the philosophy of AI with Tom McClelland, Dr. Tom McClelland over at Cambridge, who I actually had a reading group with whom I actually had a reading group when I was there last year. And also your TA is Alex, who happens to be my classmate. So we're really in familiar
Small world.
circles. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you came to pick out this course, because we had a few to choose from. And what was it about philosophy and what was it about the philosophy of AI that maybe attracted you?
I have to say I've always been fascinated by the intersectionality of technology and philosophy. I actually presented a TEDx talk about a year ago that observed how technology has influenced generational values. And I was looking at my life and the pace of life of my mom and my grandma, and it's completely different. And I was really just observing how technology has worked to expedite that pace of life. So I think when I saw the philosophy of AI program, I mean, it was the perfect accumulation of all my interests. And of course, I had just started dabbling with philosophy. And I was just really curious to see how the two intersected, especially as AI becomes increasingly important in our society.
Yeah, I mean, so as someone who's currently looking into professional philosophy, to be honest, in high school, I scarcely had an idea of what philosophy was. I didn't come to read my first philosophy book maybe until after I graduated high school, the summer before college. And I had no idea that I was going to be a philosophy major. But how did you say you're like sort of, you were dabbling in philosophy a little bit already, and now you're looking to immerse yourself in it, and that's why you took the course. But how did you even come to dabble in it? That's one of the most common questions I get for high schoolers applying to the program is what even is philosophy?
Mm.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I'm part of the debate team at my school, and my school is fantastic in providing a variety of extracurricular activities and ways to interact with new material. So, I mean, when I started debate, I heard a lot of references to different frameworks to think about different problems, and I was honestly fascinated. Like, ooh, deontology, what is that? Like, and so eventually, I started taking an ethics course this semester with my professor, Mr. Wolf, who's fantastic. And what ultimately ended up happening was I was selected to present a Equitas workshop. So Equitas workshops are days taken out of my school curriculum for the whole high school essentially. And we immerse students in different workshops, which are so much fun on various like social justice topics. And so I'm hoping to present mine on algorithmic bias, which is, I think, one of the main things that I came across earlier. Because during debate, one of our resolutions was about echo chambers and epistemic bubbles, about, like, how do we get our news sources? What information are we letting inform us? And this idea of how AI works to give us algorithms that are targeted towards certain audiences was something that has definitely become more prevalent. And I think that was my first interaction with that.
That's super cool. So my advisor back in Cambridge, Jessie Mutton, actually is working on exactly that issue. She's an epistemologist working on issues of bias. So I'd really recommend you to maybe look into her work,
That would be great.
or even like talk to Tom and reach out and see if she'd be willing to help out with your project. But so I'm actually no expert in. I know quite very little about the philosophy of AI. I've read bits and pieces here and there. So I I actually would want to defer to you and ask you, what is the philosophy of AI? What have you sort of learned about over the course of your experience with Tom and with Alex?
We've covered a variety of topics from the start, and I think one of the first things we did was get a little bit of background on, foundational philosophy, but eventually we started looking at what it means to be artificial intelligence. And I love that we dissected the word. We looked at what artificial means and what intelligence means, and then use that to inform how we can apply philosophy to it. So one of the first things we did was look at, can artificial intelligence be creative? Can it be intelligent? And we were, looking at various pieces of artwork that has been designed by artificial intelligence. And of course, there have been various tests that, draw the line for what is AI versus what is essentially human, what can perform human activities. And I remember we've also looked at the history of the progression of artificial intelligence. One of the first things we looked at was Charles Babbage's analytical machine, which was just a number churner essentially with inputs and outputs. And one of my inspirations, Ada Lovelace, who was considered one of the first female computer scientists, actually predicted that one day such AI would be able to form elaborate pieces of music, which to this day they can, but despite the fact that it was deemed impossible back then. So and this, of course, was at a time where women were not allowed to get college education. So, I mean, it was quite inspirational, and learning about it has been an absolute privilege.
So tell me about maybe one particular lecture, one paper that you read with Tom and Alex that was especially, I don't know, maybe inspiring or eye-opening, or fill in the adjective.
I think during our lectures with Dr. McClelland, we mostly focus on his fantastic lectures, and he's an amazing teacher and makes everything so interactive and engaging. It's one of the most enriching educational experiences I've had. But one of the philosophical lectures that drew me to philosophy in the first place was Michael Sanders, who is a lecturer and teacher at Harvard for philosophy. And he was looking at the morality of murder and proposed these various thought experiments that were completely engaging and fantastic, and just kind of left me sitting there in awe, like, ooh, what would I do?
And at this point, I want to ask two questions. One is, do you have a favorite philosopher? Two is, do you have a favorite paper that you've read thus far in the program?
um, Favorite philosopher, I would say I've just started looking into her work, but Hannah Arendt is someone that I think, in connection to these echo chambers and epistemic bubbles, has become pretty inspirational and insightful. So her work on truth and politics is something that I find completely interesting. She talks about the varying durability of various truths, starting with mathematical and scientific, and eventually reaching like historical truths, which I think is so interesting, and something that becomes increasingly important with politics. And I think that's something that, spans history from the time that she was born through she was, I think, Jewish during the Nazi regime. So she had that life experience as her background. And it's something that I look forward to learning more about.
Yeah. So before you tell me about your favorite paper, I want to follow up on that a little bit. Um, So it sounds like, given all that you've said, your interest in philosophy sort of intersect with your, at least somewhat, well, in a fairly fundamental way, it seems, with your interests in politics and in sort of current events and in issues of social justice. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's mostly geared toward philosophy, but there's definitely touching on politics and other issues and aspects of life. So yeah.
So, um, to follow up on that, I'm because if you actually, as someone who now is somewhat familiar with the field, a lot of philosophy is, especially contemporary Anglophone philosophy that's being done at places like Cambridge, is not, the mainstream is not particularly current, as in it's not particularly focused on current events and political issues. Um, but there's a growing subset of philosophers who are using um, their philosophical tools and perspectives um, to address socially challenging issues. How have you felt, if you felt, um, the philosophical ways of thinking and the tools that you've been taught in philosophy, or the perspectives, the frameworks, whatever? Um, how has that helped you orient yourself, practically speaking, in these like political and social issues?
That's an interesting question. I think something beautiful that philosophy has given me is this ability to be really rational about the decisions I'm making and really questioning my own assumptions about, what beliefs am I inheriting? What community values am I so immersed in that I don't realize that there's, other options out there that I should look into. And I think that kind of questioning and awareness of my place in the world is something that only philosophy has thus far instilled in me. So I'm
That's
surely
really,
grateful for that.
no, that's
Uh,
really great to hear. It actually so happens that the other student I interviewed for Tom's class last session, uh, so I guess like a previous alum of the philosophy of AI course, he actually said exactly the same thing when I asked him. Simon said one of the things he took away was this ability to like realize that his own assumptions were open to criticism, and the philosophical way of thinking really helped him sort of
Absolutely.
rational.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And it's a
yeah,
part of, what I think is learning and growing as a thinker and, civic person. And I think that ability to remain informed and be engaged even at a young age. Like I know my mom always tells me I was not aware of politics at your age, but I mean, in our world where technology is everything, it's of course fundamental to have a grip on that and be able to make rational decisions.
that's right. And um, one of the um, uh, for someone like, I mean, to drop some names, for someone like Kant, actually, that's sort of one of the fundamental marks of maturity and of being, as in like a mature human being. For him, is to, in this way, take rational responsibility for one's own thoughts. Um, and the basic idea there is that up until your, I don't know, adolescence or even older, or for some people much older, a lot of your thinking is just what you inherit. And
Absolutely.
so there's a sense in which you're being pushed around by forces external to you, and you're not really able to um, to autonomously take control of your own life at this level. So yeah, uh, all that to say, Kant would love to hear what you're saying. No, so back to the favorite paper.
I was racking my brain while we were, discussing, and I don't think I have one that comes to mind immediately, but I know that as I embark on my research paper journey, this will be something that becomes increasingly important. So I will let you know.
Yeah, or actually, I guess favorite, perhaps sub, like favorite lecture of Tom's?
Favorite lecture of Tom's? I think definitely some of the first ones, he blew my mind. He was just asking me these questions, and then I was like, yes, I believe this. And then he was like, but what about that? And then I was just, my mind was just blown in our first lectures. I was like, I am obsessed with this process and this lecture and this course, and which is something I loved. But in terms of content, I would say some of my favorite topic has definitely been the algorithmic bias topic, because of how tangible its implications are for our society nowadays. And, we were discussing, the very practical application. So who gets a loan in our society, whose face is recognized at airport security, and ultimately, how does AI have the potential to exacerbate these societal inequalities?
Super, super duper interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, so at this point, you're right on the cusp of transitioning to the research process. But have you done a lot of writing thus far yet?
I've done a couple of paragraphs for Alex on our Sunday sessions. We meet once a week to kind of dissect the learning I've had with Tom, and also extend on that regards to my personal interest. And so I've written several paragraphs about, um, different issues, from the black box topic, which is like what happens when we give AI an input and an output, and then what kind of processes go in between, many other things too. But I think now what we're going to start doing is definitely zeroing in on this algorithmic bias process, which I think will be the subject of my thesis.
That's super exciting. Um, so have you gotten a sense yet of how, so a first question, so you mentioned that earlier that you're not doing IB, is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So have you had any exposure in doing sort of this kind of writing, not just like philosophical, but more generally research-based writing?
So we've done several research papers at my school, but never to this extent, to this depth, to this breadth of knowledge, which is why I'm so grateful to be in this course, because it really expands on that part of my education that has been, skimmed the surface, but never really gone deep enough to inculcate in me the skills that I need to kind of master it. So this is something that I'm very excited to do. I know it'll be a challenging process of revision and research and looking at various different papers, but I think it's important for me to do so, especially since I will be in college in 2 years, which is crazy to think about. But I'm sure you can attest to the fact that it's an important skill. So I'm looking forward to it.
And I'd say I wasn't prepared when I was uh, good research papers. Um, I don't think I was writing good research papers until maybe last year. And the thing is, when I was looking at the kinds of papers that our students are able to produce, like the one that Simon wrote, which actually he was also mentored by Tom, and it so happened that he actually got published. I can send you his paper later. It's super cool. He talked about issues of trust in cryptocurrency. So he took his understanding of cryptocurrency and merged it with the stuff he was learning in the philosophy of AI course and in the philosophy of trust. So there's like all sorts of philosophers talking about what trust is, and super
That
cool
sounds,
project.
yeah.
Yeah, super exciting project. And I mean, your project on algorithmic bias is, I think, equally promising. What's so, I think, almost, dare I say, inspiring about the course that Tom is doing, I think, is that the students end up producing papers, philosophy papers, that end up being really geared into real world issues, because of AI being such an important technology, emerging technology in our society. and the issues it examines are really sort of not yet fully understood even by the experts. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so this, if anything, it encourages like young students to be engaging in this tract of discourse that is just so incredibly important for people to be thinking about and talking about, and that's so exciting.
I know it's a very thrilling process, and I'm so excited to read Simon's paper. I'm sure it'll provide good guidance and a good understanding of what I'm aiming for. And absolutely, I think Dr. McClelland has been absolutely fantastic in not only teaching me the most foundational philosophy skills and frameworks, but also providing that practical application that is really for me what makes it so exciting. Seeing how these different frameworks and these different ideas really impact my life on a day-to-day basis is what makes philosophy so exciting and ever changing for me, because I'll be making a decision and all of a sudden I'm like, what would what would Plato say? Let's think about virtue ethics. So it's really fantastic.
So I want to zoom out a little bit and return to you. So you're a junior currently. Um,
Yes.
College, as you said, is the terrible fact, or the lovely fact, is that college is around the corner. Do you have any idea? Are you going to major in philosophy? Have you thought about it? I mean, at this stage, it's all sort of talk, all just talk. But just what are your academic interests, uh, slightly in the long term?
I have two major interests that I think will determine the journey that I take through college. The first being absolutely philosophy. Ever since I feel like I'm falling down a wonderful rabbit hole that I'm excited for. So that's definitely something in my mind. And, I'm looking at colleges with strong philosophy programs. I know Cambridge, of course, is a fantastic one. Harvard University is fantastic too. And there are several others, but the second interest being economics and entrepreneurship. So a couple of years ago, I started a small fashion franchise out of my bedroom. And it's been a crazy journey. We were in Vogue last month, which was incredible. And I'm also involved in an investment club at my school. So this has been a recurring trend. Again, I'm sure that that's something that's slightly inherited. My dad works in finance, but it's been a fantastic topic as well. And I'm attracted to learning more about that as well. So a mix of the two. We'll see what ends up happening.
Yeah, yeah, and there's um, there's always, and with these interests, the thing about philosophy is that I think one of my professors once described it as being similar to stand-up comedy in that it has no subject matter of its own. So stand-up comedians talk about anything and everything. Similarly, philosophers talk about anything and everything. You have the philosophy of AI, of um, of gender, of race, of politics, and of business. And so, um, as a matter of fact, Tom is actually teaching two more courses for us in the spring. One's
Oh,
a philosophy of business course, actually, and the
great.
other, he's doing a new program called the Future Entrepreneur Program. I don't know if he's mentioned it to you, has he?
No, we haven't talked about that. No.
Yeah, so
Sounds interesting though.
it's it's actually it'd be right up your alley, but I'm not trying to sell you the program
I'm
right now. I'm just
but the
yeah.
program's already been sold to me. If I have the opportunity to sign up, I will.
So what they're doing there is they've partnered with a startup in Cambridge called Foodbud AI, and what the program is going to do is combine academic lectures uh, re- related to the philosophy of AI and the philosophy of business, and
Wow.
construct a student consultant team that will end up writing a white paper for Foodbud AI
Wow.
related to issues of food ethics and business ethics. so that's like a practical application of philosophy in the business realm kind of program. Yeah.
That's
No, I not trying to sell you the program. I just thought you might be.
already sold. Told you.
Yeah. Um,
No, that sounds
so
really interesting.
yeah. So all I'm trying to say with that is that down the road, as you move into college, the opportunities of academic interests will expand beyond your imagination. There will be subjects and disciplines that you didn't even know existed that will somehow bring together all your academic interests. And I'm all I'm saying is I'm super excited for you.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see what's out there and what more I can learn about and what practical applications there are. I mean, this project sounds immensely thrilling, and yeah, I look forward to seeing what other courses CCIR has in stock for me.
So just one more question before beyond college, beyond your academic interests, as someone who's deeply interested in real world issues and who is already an entrepreneur at 16, what do you envision yourself doing in 5, 10 years?
I get this question a lot from, the people that surround me. And I think, at the moment, my main goal is to really start interacting with the world that in a way that goes beyond my school or community bubble. And really, taking the most advantage I can with the education that I'm given because I'm tremendously lucky. So I think at the moment, I will continue pursuing the interests that I have. Regarding 5 to 10 years down the line, I'm sure I will be making use of my philosophical practices in whatever field I'm in, be it economics, be it finance, be it entrepreneurship. But the beautiful thing, like you said, is that philosophy has no subject matter, and it'll be something that I use as a lens to view the world for the rest of my life. So for that, I'm grateful.
Fantastic. So the way I usually wrap this up is I ask the students if there's any questions they have for me or any comment they have that they felt like they really wanted to say, but I had failed as a interviewer to ask. Um,
I think one thing I would say, if somebody's watching or if they're thinking about joining CCIR, would definitely be go for it. I know I will be going for round 2 and 3, so definitely worth pursuing. And otherwise, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor to be interviewed by you.
oh no, it was. Don't say it's an honor. It was just fun. It was good fun.
I will.
But thank you so much for joining us, Bella. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you.